Griffin stood up, not because he was told to, not because the courtroom demanded it, but because something ancient and unbearable rose inside him, something even he didn't understand. The kind of force that doesn't come from memory, but from something older, deeper. A voice in his bones. You saw it too, didn't you? How the room didn't breathe when he walked to the front. The way his oversized blazer clung to his shoulders like it knew it didn't belong there, like it had been borrowed from a past that never fit. 11 years old, skin like burnished mahogany in a place built by marble lies. He looked at the Justice Honorable Diane Whitmore, 34 years on the bench, not a single appeal ever overturned, and then said 5 words no one was prepared to hear. You're my mom, Diane. The bailiff blinked, unsure if protocol still applied. The attorneys froze mid-paper shuffle. A woman in the gallery gasped before smothering her mouth with both hands. And the judge, Judge Whitmore, who had sentenced men to life without blinking, who once made a gang leader cry on national television, did something that shattered the room like stained glass. Her face collapsed. Not with shock, not with fear, but recognition. You didn't read about this in the papers. You won't find this on any docket. No transcripts, no recordings. The feed cut for technical difficulties exactly 28 seconds after Griffin spoke, and when it came back, he was gone. Just gone. The court clerk swore she never saw him leave. The security tapes froze. The stenographer's fingers stopped cold, mid-word. Bell. Halfway through, believe. They called it a prank, a deepfake stunt. But those of us in the room, we know better. We felt it. Something ancient cracked open. Diane hasn't spoken publicly since that day, and every attempt to reach her results in silence or static. But what no one knows, what you're about to see, is what happened the night before that hearing. There's a foster home outside Savannah. Quiet, forgotten, the kind with too much history in its walls and too many names in its files. A caseworker named Paul Ridley logged an unusual entry on Griffin's intake sheet just 12 hours before the trial. Child claims he woke up to a woman standing at the foot of his bed humming. Said she smelled like wild oranges. Said her voice felt like home. That scent, wild oranges. It matches a sealed report from 1982 about a newborn taken from a teen mother during a closed-door adoption. The birth mother's only request? That her baby be wrapped in the blanket she made, embroidered with orange blossoms. The file was buried, locked, burned, but one thread survived. A signature, faint but legible, on the last page. Diane M. Whitmore. Now ask yourself this. How did a black boy with no access to sealed court records walk into a federal courtroom and name a woman no one ever linked to him? Why did the judge, whose personal history has always been pristine, begin sobbing silently as if she already knew the truth? And most of all, why does no one remember Griffin leaving the courtroom? But that's not the worst part. At 2:17 a.m. this morning, Judge Diane Whitmore was found unconscious in her home. In her hand, a baby blanket, and stitched into the hem, so faint it almost wasn't there, were 3 words that don't make sense. Until you see them. I remember you, and now so do you. What happens next will make you question everything. The blanket lay crumpled in her trembling hands, heavier than any physical weight, soaked in silence that screamed louder than 1,000 verdicts. Diane Whitmore's eyes fluttered open to darkness that wasn't just the absence of light. It was the hollow space inside her own mind, a void gnawing at her sense of self. She didn't know how long she'd been unconscious. Time had warped around her like a slow tide, pulling her further from everything she thought was real. And then the whispers started. Soft, impossible to place, like voices threaded through static, humming just beyond comprehension. Diane's ears strained, but every time she caught a fragment, a name, a plea, it dissolved before she could anchor it. That same eerie hum Griffin claimed he heard at the foster home, the one that smelled of wild oranges and memories that shouldn't exist, now clawed at her brain, unrelenting and merciless. She sat up, breathing shallow and ragged, gripping the blanket tighter. The 3 words stitched into the fabric glowing faintly in her mind's eye. I remember you. But who was I? The question refused to leave, her sinking into her like a poison she couldn't vomit out. Diane reached for her phone, her fingers numb and clumsy as if the device was an alien artifact. The screen flickered erratically, images distorting, words twisting into nonsense. Her own voice recorded in a voicemail she never remembered leaving, whispering, "Find him, before it's too late." That voicemail shouldn't exist. She didn't have a son. At least that's what she told herself. Outside her door, a knock fractured the silence. The kind of knock that doesn't feel like a visitor but an intrusion. The knock that stirs every buried anxiety with cold, deliberate pressure. Diane hesitated, then opened. Standing there was a man she barely recognized, Paul Ridley, the caseworker. His eyes were too sharp, too knowing, like a man who carries secrets better left untouched. His smile was thin, edged with something unsettling. "I came as soon as I heard," he said. His voice was low, steady, but beneath it lurked a tremor, one Diane wasn't sure if she heard or imagined. "There's things you need to know about Griffin, things no one's telling you. But what no one tells you, the real unsolved mystery, lurks between the lines." Paul stepped inside, the air thickening with the kind of dread that seeps into bones and refuses to leave. Diane watched him as he pulled from his coat pocket a battered voice recorder, the tape inside still. Whirring faintly, he pressed play. A child's voice, unmistakably Griffin's, echoed through the room, but the words weren't the ones she remembered hearing in court. Instead, the tape played a chilling confession, filled with pauses and stutters that made the boy sound broken, fractured. "I don't know who you are. You're not my mom. None of this is real." Diane's heart slammed against her ribs, a fractured mirror reflecting a truth she couldn't grasp. Was Griffin lying? Or was she? The tape cut out abruptly, leaving behind an emptiness more deafening than the silence before. Her memories began to unravel, snapshots of faces she couldn't place, names that didn't fit, a house she'd never seen but felt like home in nightmares. The lines between what was real and what was illusion blurred until she couldn't tell where Diane Whitmore ended, and the story began. Paul leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "You have to remember, Diane, before they erase it all, before you lose him forever. But who was they? And what did they want from her?" The shadows in the corners of her room seemed to shift, alive with intent, whispering secrets she was too afraid to hear. Her phone buzzed again, another voicemail. This time a woman's voice, trembling but urgent, saying only, "Don't trust Paul. Not everything he says is true." Diane looked at him, suspicion twisting inside her like a knife she couldn't pull out. Was he the key to the truth? Or the architect of her unraveling? Outside, the night pressed in heavier, the world holding its breath, waiting for her next move. And somewhere deep beneath it all, the question burned hotter than ever. What are they hiding? You think you know. The truth. But the truth is waiting, hidden in the cracks of your memory, whispered in the spaces they don't want you to remember. And just when you believe it's over, it's only just begun. Diane sat alone in the dim light of her study, the baby, blanket folded carefully beside her like a relic from a world just beyond reach. For the first time in days, a sliver of clarity cut through the haze that clouded her mind. The pieces, fractured, jagged, and barely recognizable, were beginning to line up, whispering the promise of an answer she thought she'd never find. Griffin, the boy who vanished from the courtroom, the voice on the recorder that didn't quite match, the strange whispers that gnawed at the edges of her consciousness. What if they were all part of a hidden truth, buried beneath layers of forgotten memories and deliberate erasure? What if everything she feared was tangled in a secret she once knew, but had been forced to forget? She pulled up an old case file, dust mottled and nearly illegible, tucked away in the county archives. The birth certificate bore a name, Marcus Allen. The year matched the sealed adoption report, the one with the orange blossom blanket and the whispered promise of home. She found a faded photograph of a young woman holding a child, her eyes too tired to hide the storm beneath, the same wild orange scent lingering in Diane's mind like a ghost. The name scrawled on the bottom was unmistakably hers, Diane Whitmore. Her fingers trembled as she scanned a handwritten letter folded between the pages, the words inked with desperation and regret. A mother's plea for her lost son, a warning about shadows that lurk in the spaces between reality and memory. Diane read on, the voice of that long-gone woman bleeding into her bones, recounting an event decades ago, an eerie disappearance eerily echoing Griffin's vanishing act. A boy just like Griffin vanished without a trace after speaking a name no one else heard. The townspeople called it an unsolved mystery, a story whispered around campfires and dismissed as folklore. But Diane recognized the truth beneath the myth, a memory glitch in her own fractured past surfacing like a drowning diver gasping for air. She felt the room close in, the walls breathing with a quiet menace as if the house itself held its breath, waiting for her next move. The echoes of that past event wrapped around her like a noose, fear, confusion, the sense of being watched by something unseen yet relentless. Not a person, not a thing with a name, but a presence that burrows into your mind, twisting reality until you question everything you thought you knew. It was watching from the beginning, lurking in the periphery of every memory, every forgotten moment, every whisper she tried to silence. The letter warned of this force, never named, but always felt, a dark pulse beneath the surface of life, preying on doubt, feeding on fractured minds, blurring the line between truth and deception. Diane's skin prickled with the weight of it, a psychological fog that had wrapped itself tightly around her soul, whispering lies disguised as memories. She realized with a sickening certainty that this wasn't just about Griffin or her lost past. It was about her entire sense of reality unraveling. Then, in a corner of the letter, a single detail shattered the fragile resolution. The mother's plea mentioned a man, a stranger who arrived after the boy disappeared, claiming to search for answers but leaving behind more questions than he solved. A man named Paul Ridley. Diane's breath caught. The caseworker standing quietly in her living room, the one she'd started to trust, the one who brought her the voice recorder, the same Paul who warned her about them, was the stranger from her mother's letter. His presence wasn't a coincidence. He was part of the force watching, the deeper danger she'd sensed but couldn't name. Her world shifted violently beneath her feet as the past and present collided, forcing her to question everything all over again. The mystery she thought she'd uncovered dissolved into a darker, more tangled web of deceit and manipulation, one where memory and reality were enemies, and trust was the most dangerous illusion of all. As Diane's eyes flicked to the recorder, new message blinked silently on her phone, a video file with no sender, no explanation. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen, knowing that opening it would rewrite everything she believed, forcing her, and now you, to rewatch the entire story from the beginning, because what you thought was truth was just the first lie. There's something you haven't been told. Diane isn't alone, not by a long shot. Somewhere in scattered places across cities you think you know, people are waking up with the same unbearable knot in their chest, the same flicker of doubt gnawing at their memories, the same unspoken fear that reality has been rewritten while they slept. They don't know each other, at least not yet, but they share fragments of a puzzle no one once pieced together. Flickers of shadowed faces in the corners of their vision, words slipping through their dreams like warning signals, symbols etched into graffiti or carved quietly into forgotten corners of old buildings, symbols you've passed 100 times without noticing, but now feel impossible to unsee. The kind of signs that were never meant for you, until now. Diane's story isn't isolated. It's part of a wider tapestry, a hidden network of lives fractured and rewoven beneath the surface of everyday existence. The emails she never received, the calls that went unanswered, the recordings she found buried deep in old tapes, all of it connects to others who have been silently watching, waiting, or maybe trapped in the same cycle of distortion and memory loss. Some have caught whispers and shared dreams, vivid, tangled visions of a place that isn't quite here or there, where time folds over itself and names lose their meaning. They wake with fragments of conversations they never had, messages scrawled in shadows that vanish the moment they blink. This isn't paranoia. You were right all along. The signs were there. The found footage from 20 years ago that no network dared to air. The government documents never released that hint at experiments with memory and identity that went far beyond ethics or law. These aren't conspiracy theories. These are pieces of a reality, warped by a force more invasive than any secret agency or clandestine program. This force seeps into the edges of your mind, twisting the lens through which you see yourself and the world around you. And there's someone watching all of it with a clarity no one else seems to have. An observer who moves through these tangled stories like a shadow that refuses to be caught, a third perspective that pierces the veil. They don't speak openly, and their presence is only marked by cryptic transmissions left in the digital ether, distorted images, static-laced audio, fleeting glimpses of a figure that looks familiar yet impossible to place. Their messages hint at knowledge too dangerous to share outright, warnings embedded in riddles and coded signals that seem designed specifically for you, the viewer, as if you're being pulled into something far bigger than any single story. Identity becomes fluid. In their world, memories aren't anchors but weapons, and control is the currency exchanged in whispered deals between what is real and what is fabricated. Who are you when the memories you hold might have been planted, edited, erased? What if the person you trust the most is the one rewriting your history? The observer doesn't answer these questions. Instead, they deepen the mystery, making you question not just Diane's reality, but your own. The tension thickens as these threads converge. Diane's fragmented memories, the silent watchers scattered in the dark, and the observer whose truth may be the only one left standing. But even as you reach for answers, the story fractures once again, pulling you deeper into a maze with no clear exit. The symbols grow clearer yet more cryptic, the voices louder but forever just out of reach. And through it all, the chilling certainty remains. You're not crazy, they lied to you. As the screen flickers and the last transmission fades into static, you realize this is only the beginning. The threads are pulling tight, and whatever force has been watching from the shadows is moving closer, its presence more personal, more intimate than ever before. You feel it now, watching, waiting, knowing. The story isn't just Diane's, it's yours, and you haven't escaped it yet. Diane stood at the edge of everything she thought she knew, the truth looming like a shadow that stretched longer and darker than any nightmare she'd ever faced. The weight of the puzzle pieces now made sense, but the meaning beneath them, that was a question no one had dared ask until now. It wasn't what had happened to her, to Griffin, to the others scattered in the shadows. It was why. And that, why carved its way into her soul with a cold, deliberate cruelty. It was a question about the fragility of identity, about the cracks we all hide beneath the surface. About memory, not as a record of facts, but as a fragile, malleable thing that defines who we believe ourselves to be. Diane felt the truth settle inside her like poison and salvation wrapped in the same breath. Maybe the fractures, the lies, the haunting silence around her past were all part of a deeper human truth nobody wanted to face, that sometimes to survive we must rewrite ourselves. That reality is not a fixed place, but a fragile story told in the trembling language of fear, hope, and desperate need. She was exhausted, so tired of chasing shadows, of feeling like she was a ghost haunting her own life. And then, the confession came, raw and ragged, like a cry from a broken place inside her heart she never dared reveal. "I don't know if I'm fighting for truth," she whispered to the empty room, voice barely a breath, "or if I'm just trying to hold on to something, anything, that makes me feel human." It was a moment of complete vulnerability, a fracture in the armor of her mind, where fear, grief, and something like hope collided. Because what if the truth she chased wasn't a savior, but a reckoning? What if knowing was the most dangerous act of all? She realized then that the choice before her was no longer about uncovering secrets, but about what to do with the ones she already held. To let the truth consume her, or to carry its weight and keep moving forward. To be destroyed by reality, or saved by the fragile, flawed humanity that clung stubbornly to the edges of all the chaos. And the dread was not just around her, it was inside her, a living thing that stretched its cold fingers into her thoughts, her memories, her very sense of self. The observer, the watchers, the cryptic messages, they weren't just forces outside her. They were echoes of the struggle within every human soul to grasp meaning when everything feels like a lie, to find connection when you're surrounded by silence, to believe in something real when the ground beneath you keeps shifting. In this terrifying awakening, Diane understood. The story was never about the mystery itself. It was about what that mystery revealed. About fear, about love, about the desperate, beautiful attempt to find light in a world that too often wants to swallow it whole. It was about the infinite fragility and strength in being human, standing on the edge of the abyss and choosing whether to fall or to fight. And as she looked out into the fading light, the silence around her thick with the unspoken, the screen in front of you flickered like a heartbeat between worlds, and the story whispered its final haunting line, a truth half buried, half revealed. Some truths don't want to be found. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.